Ah, the GM48. There's nothing quite like the challenge of making a game in 48 hours. I've participated for years, and some of my earliest interactions with the game maker community come from there. So I was thrilled when, after a long hiatus, the 48th Game Maker 48 Game Jam was scheduled for March 13th, 2026. For this jam, I worked with Mimpy and WanderLustintheEnd, two exceptional devs I met through the Game Maker Discord. I've linked their channels below, so go check them out. In this video, I'll be explaining how development of our game Fish Out of Water went, mostly focusing on the art side since that's what I worked on during the jam. In a 48-hour team project, having a defined idea is everything. Everyone needs to know exactly what they're doing or you'll lose time on features that could get cut later. When the theme dropped, we jumped into a call and used an online whiteboard to map out ideas of what we would make. The theme for this GM48 was Equivalent Exchange. This image is what we ended up with at the end of our call. We considered things like a stock market or management style game. I wasn't too interested in making a game in that style, but I figured a lot of people would. So I wanted something more action focused. I wanted to make something a bit more unique. The final idea was a mix of a few concepts. One key mechanic was that enemies don't take damage directly. Instead, you knock them back into hazards like saws to defeat them. We went with an underwater theme, using bubbles as ammo. You can already see ideas here that didn't make it in, like a fan or propeller that would push the player and enemies. Cool concept, but it got cut so we could focus on what mattered. Once we had an idea worked out, we split roles. All three of us could program, but we didn't need 3 full programmers. I focused on art, Mimpy took the lead on programming, and Wanderlust handled game feel, sound effects, and additional programming work. As the artist, I aimed for something simple yet charming. I started by picking a limited color palette from Lostpick. I like working with small palettes. It keeps things cohesive and stops me from overcomplicating design. The fish design was obviously heavily inspired by Mario's Cheep Cheeps. Round, big lips, big eyes. That shape made it easier to draw in multiple directions as well. I made 5 directions, and with sprite flipping that gave us coverage for 8, which saved a lot of time, but also gave our sprites a sense of 3-dimensionality. For tiles, I referenced the Nuclear Throne tile set. You can see similarities here in the walls and sand. I worked on enemies first since they were more important. One enemy mirrors the player's attack style, so I reused and modified sprites to save time. The hardest enemy to animate was the hammerhead shark. Getting it to look 3D at a small resolution was tricky, so I used darker colors for depth and added a shadow to make it feel like it was swimming above the ground. I'll also note that I was kind of left to my own devices to create enemy designs and so forth. We didn't really have a lot of concepts for what the enemies would actually do in-game, so I mostly would just make sprites for the enemies, and then give them to our programmers to create some cool mechanic around them. The hazards were pretty straightforward. Wanderlust suggested a bomb, which was fun to work on, and I made that along with the explosion. I also made most of the other hazards, such as the spikes and the saw. To sell the underwater feel, I added lots of decorative tiles. These help create visual interest and bring more color into the levels. I used Minecraft Coral as a reference for some of these. Like in most game jams, we had to scrap ideas. I made a boss sprite, a fish with hands, building on the long-running fish with legs joke in GM48. The idea was a large enemy with separate hand sprites that could punch or shoot bubbles. Unfortunately, we ran out of time, so it never made it in. Even though I handled most of the art, a lot of what made it look good came from the team. Wanderlust added particles and sound effects that made things feel alive. Mimpy wrote movement code that gave enemies a natural underwater motion. Wanderlust also added a water overlay effect that tied everything together, and even adjusted the sand color to something more fitting, something I missed because I stuck too closely to my limited palette. It really goes to show that good art alone doesn't make a game look good. Effects, movement, and polish matter just as much. Out of over 100 entries, Fish Out of Water placed 17th. I was satisfied with that, especially given how high the overall quality of games in this jam was. The winning game, Conservation of Bass, had a larger team and some of the best presentation in the jam. This jam was a blast. There were a lot of strong entries, and the community was great as always. We got useful feedback. The main issue was the concept and the theme didn't come across clearly, but people really liked the atmosphere, including the art, sound, and effects. If you want to play our game, it's linked below on itch.io. We've cleaned it up a bit, but we're probably not adding more since we've all moved on to other projects. I really enjoyed this GM48. If you're a developer thinking about joining a game jam, I highly recommend it. It teaches you how to manage scope and time, and 48 hours is just enough constraint to keep you focused without being overwhelming. There's a lot of creativity on the GM48 site, and it's worth checking out. I made a video playing GM48 games, so you can see what's possible even for inexperienced or solo developers. The point of jams like this is to learn and to have fun, and I always come away from GM48s doing exactly that, so I highly recommend it. Anyway, thank you all so much for watching. I've been The Great Gatsby, and I hope you have a lovely evening.